First Lightwork episode.
Oh my gosh, first Lightwork episode. I'm so excited to be here in our brand new studio here in New York City. We've put so much effort into building this space. It's a lot of what we're doing with the Lightspeed brand. I think bringing people back to this time that feels like today feels, where everything is moving so fast. Are we going to have flying cars tomorrow? AI, robotics, it's all moving so quickly. And so this space is to make you feel that. And I also felt like podcasts today are so sparse. They're so spa-like. I kind of want to go back to a time where things are a little bit more maximalistic.
I know. When I first walked in here, I was like, this feels like a museum or a Silicon Valley garage even. And I'm so excited to be able to have conversations in this room, in this space that you've created.
So Claire, this is our first episode of Lightwork. What do you want people to know about you and the show?
So for people who are a little less familiar with who I am, my name is Claire, and I'm also known as Zowie on the internet. I spent the last 6 years in venture as an investor in early stage startups, but about a year ago, decided to think more deeply about how tech and venture narratives were being shared on mainstream media. And so started posting on TikTok and Instagram, actually in stealth, because I was a little embarrassed by it.
It's okay to be cringe.
I know. And I was like, this is so cringe. Nobody wants to watch tech stories on this, more fun platform. But it slowly grew. And I realized a lot of people are interested in the future. And I feel very lucky to have this unique window into where things are happening. And so decided to start sharing on short form media, and that's how we got connected.
That's how we got connected, and how we led to this moment. For those of you who don't know, I'm Josh Machiz. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Lightspeed. And when Claire joined, we talked about how do you take what she does so well and bring it long form into a podcast format where we can hopefully make all of the AI news of the week digestible for people, and something that they can really look forward to every week of the world is moving so fast. There's so many stories. How do we just distill that down to something salient that people can, feel like they got a grasp on everything that's happening so quickly?
I've always felt like I've played a unique role in playing translator for a lot of what's happening in Silicon Valley, to even my friends and family, to my audience. And I'm excited to be able to do that with you, to be able to do that with people in the Lightspeed universe and beyond.
I also think there's so many smart people at Lightspeed, and I'm so excited for our audience to feel that when we open source this org, that you're going to be like, wow, these are really interesting people with interesting, deep insights that you might not be able to get anywhere else but a venture firm.
And I just thought back to why I started my original platform was really because I wanted to reach the younger version of myself in college who was just excited about tech and startups. And hopefully this is a space where we can externalize some of that.
Yeah, we're excited for all of you to join us, young and old, here on Lightwork.
And with that, we've got a really big week. Anthropic shipped its most powerful public model yet. And by the time you're watching this, SpaceX will have opened up for trading, which could be the largest IPO in history. Apple rebuilt Siri from scratch and is running it on Google Gemini. And notably, we'll discuss how the web has crossed a specific line where for the first time, more of its traffic is potentially coming from AI agents than from humans. And then we'll have a very special guest with Lightspeed co-founder Ravi Mhatre joining us. And we'll close on 3 really cool deals across Beacon, Sandstone, and A Security. Let's get into it. Big release from Anthropic this week.
I mean, wow. I don't think everyone was expecting Anthropic to come out with a Mythos level model this quickly, but here we are.
I honestly thought they would keep it for a little bit longer.
I thought it was going to take them a while before they put this out, but I think they found a way around it, but I'm not sure everybody loved that. Can you explain?
So for a little bit more context, Mythos is this model that was too dangerous to release. This was announced a couple months ago, and people were freaking out because it was able to find thousands of vulnerabilities in software platforms that we know that run our government, our healthcare systems, basic internet infrastructure. And so people were freaking out about Mythos. And it was an unprecedented moment because Anthropic deliberately did not release it to the public. It decided to initiate something called Project Glasswing, where it worked with some of the most important security players like Palo Alto Networks, infrastructure providers like Google.
I mean, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Their whole platform is safety. And for them to have engaged the community that way is very Anthropic.
Yeah, and they basically gave this cohort of infrastructure providers enough time and runway to patch all of these vulnerabilities and use Mythos to strengthen up their cyber defense. So that's Mythos. That's kind of the lore around it. But just this week, they decided to launch Mythos to select providers, as well as a guardrailed version of Mythos called Fable to all users. So we technically have access to Mythos, but just with a couple guardrails.
And it's got some amazing benchmarks, right? Like this is 10 percentage points stronger on many benchmarks than Opus 4.8. This feels like a real leapfrog in terms of model capability. And I think for many people on the internet, their first impressions were, this is a model that can do a lot more than the prior versions.
Yeah, I'm curious, have you been playing around with it?
Oh my gosh, I've been playing with Fable, I think for the last 24 hours. I think what it does so well that's so different than the prior is task completion. I feel like if I give it an assignment, not only is it going to do all of the pieces that I asked it to do, but it's going to come out with something that I'm satisfied with, where I feel like in the past, all of these models required you to kind of play this kind of tinkerer coach. And with Mythos and with Fable 5, feeling very much like you can walk away from the keyboard.
Speaking to developers as well, one of the biggest takeaways from that community is that it is really great for long horizon task completion, to your point. You can leave it alone and come back 15 minutes later to a beautiful finished product. I think there was an example from Stripe where they said that they completed a code base migration, 50 million lines of code, and that only took 1 day as opposed to what would normally take 2 months. So just insane capabilities. I think also hearing a lot more about its visual ability. You can feed it a website and it can reconstruct it.
It's excellent at vibe coding.
Have you vibe coded anything?
I did. I'm working on our all hands meeting, and I vibe coded a form to basically collect everybody's responses and what do they want to hear from the company and all of these other things that we usually ask. And it's much more on brand, much prettier than what we'd usually use a small SaaS provided product for. And I think that's the danger for, the public markets that have already had this, this SaaS apocalypse or whatever you'd like to call it, is to see that this product can very easily make you the niche use case that you might have at your company. I saw someone on X have Opus 4.8 recreate the SpaceX S1, which I know we're going to talk about later, and then doing it again with Fable. And it's very much like a night and day experience, because I think of that depth that you're talking about, but also the design side of it. It looked like an S1 that would be filed to the SEC.
In terms of actually bringing this to users, though, do we want to talk about the guardrails? Because I know that was controversial.
Yeah, I mean, we have to, right? I think there were a lot of folks on the internet who were upset, understandably, about the guardrails and the retention policy that now they're going to hold all of these responses for 30 days. But I think the reason they're upset is that they really want to use Mythos to the fullest of its capabilities as developers. And so now when you use Fable, if you ask it anything that kind of either hits either the cyber bucket or the bioengineering bucket, that both of those get kind of rerouted back to Opus 4.8. So I think for some, they're upset because they want to use it more as a developer and feel like they're getting routed. And who knows whether they're actually being routed or not, but they feel like they're being routed to 4.8.
Yeah, and the best way I've explained it to people is Mythos is the unrestricted version that's available to a Google, a Palo Alto Networks, all these security providers. That's like a really fast, Ferrari engine, right? They're given access to the state-of-the-art model. What we as regular people have access to is that, but slightly handicapped. So it's that fast engine, except that fast engine won't let you go on certain roads. So that's kind of the way I've explained it for a lot of people. It's like you do have access to this state-of-the-art model, but Fable is just that same engine, but you can't have any queries around, biohazard, cyber.
I mean, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit more expensive. You should probably not use Fable to reply to your 2-second email that you've been procrastinating.
I do want to bring it back to the guardrail conversation, because another thing I thought that was really interesting was how the developer community was actually quite angry with a second guardrail that was actually buried in the system card. So there's Mythos available to these select providers. There's Fable that's available to all of us, and we run into guardrails. If you query it, it'll basically tell you, no, I can't help you with this. You have to use Opus 4.8 because you're trying to, discuss creating a bioweapon. But there's actually a layer beyond that, where buried in the system card, it'll actually silently degrade its outputs. So if they recognize that you are doing any sort of frontier model development using Mythos or Fable, it'll actually automatically degrade itself to a lower model.
But you can understand that, right? Like there was the DeepSeek moment. Both OpenAI and Anthropic have learned for some time that there are many other models distilling theirs.
But I do think where people are frustrated is that this is a guardrail that is not visible to them, and therefore they can't necessarily debug. Like if I am genuinely trying to work on pre-training pipelines or thinking about chip design, that, to push the frontier of research, and I don't know that what I'm getting from Anthropic is actual Mythos or a degraded version because they think I'm doing malicious frontier model development on their platform. It's kind of, I think, on principle, that's where people have some anger, is like, I'm paying for Mythos, but you're kind of routing me based off of what you are assuming I'm doing with your models.
Yeah, understandable. But I also think that this is kind of the price you pay to get this model that Anthropic already deemed too dangerous to share, right? Because they're worried about that distillation risk, and it seems like it's real according to all of their research.
I'm glad they're erring on the side of safety, as with something like Mythos. I'm surprised that they put it out so early.
Me too.
To, regular folk like us. But I do see where people are also frustrated with this kind of almost two-tiered system where, if you're a corporation or a major enterprise, you get access to the best of the best. But then if you're, a startup and you might not be as established as Mozilla or Google, then you kind of get access to this lower tier version. I am curious about the precedent that it sets, but at the end of the day, I think safety is always, the number one priority. And then moving on to the other news story dominating the headlines right now.
I mean, how could we not talk about it? The biggest IPO in history.
Yes, SpaceX. It sounds like we are on the eve of IPO day tomorrow.
Yeah, at the NASDAQ in Times Square where I used to work. Very excited for all the folks there and this huge win. It's going to be a tremendous day. It seems like they have the opening bell. They have a bell from Texas.
Oh, okay.
And they have the closing bell. So it's like it's going to be a big deal. And I understand security is incredibly tight to be able to get into the NASDAQ tomorrow.
And you've been actually in these rooms for these bell rings. What do you think the day will look like prediction-wise? And, I am sure you've heard some rumors. We won't share those rumors, but just having been in some of these spaces, what does that look like?
I mean, it is going to be a big day in the markets, right? There's been a lot of pent-up demand for this listing for many years. I think everyone and their brother got an email from Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs about this offering. And I think what is exciting is that there's been such a drought of large IPOs for so many years that the excitement around SpaceX is kind of unprecedented. I think what you're seeing is people are more worried about being left on the sidelines than they are about the risks that come with this company. And I think we can spend all day on the S1, and we should probably get, one of our incredible Lightspeed investors who can really dive in and explain to our audience like all of the different Elon businesses. But this is a big bet, but it's a bet on his vision. And I think it's something that Elon's done before. He did a really great job, obviously, with Tesla in selling to the street, its growth story, but also like that it went from selling cars to selling robo-taxis. All of these futurist things is what Elon does so well. And so it'll be interesting to see how the street reacts to this vision, which is even bolder. Claire, I mean, there are so many parts to the businesses. Do you have an easy way to just like make it digestible for people of like how to think about SpaceX's IPO and its businesses?
Yes. I actually had Fable spin up a little graph for me. We'll share it on the screen. I don't know if it's fully accurate because it was like a one-shot output, but I do have an explainer because I've had a lot of questions from people about what SpaceX even is.
I know. So many people think it's just the rocket company, but it's so much more. And the S1, it's a lot more.
Yeah, that one was fun to read. SpaceX is no longer just a space company, but critically, relies heavily on the space company to drive its trajectory and storytelling around it. But really how I view SpaceX are three buckets. You have the original space business. So that's the rocket business. They're bringing satellites into orbit. This is basically the space transportation company. People who are not the Starlink connectivity business, even third parties, Amazon, which has Blue Origin technically, is relying on SpaceX's rockets to bring things into orbit. So that's one part of the business. This is what SpaceX is known for, Falcon 9, Dragon, and then, what they're launching with Starship, which is kind of the next big release. The second part of this business is the connectivity side. So that's Starlink. This is actually the most profitable business of the three. And what that is, the simple way I would put it, and we can do a whole episode, honestly, on Starlink, but the simple way I would think about Starlink is it is just a much better internet. So that is their...
And it's internet anywhere you want it to be because...
Have you tried it on an airplane?
Oh my gosh. It's great. I had it on a United flight and it was a game changer.
I know. I honestly was kind of like, I don't need Starlink. And then I tried it one day and I was like, I need to buy one for my own home, or I need to carry one with me at all times.
Yeah. The only thing I don't want is the person next to me on a Zoom call. That's true. The one thing I'm like...
I haven't experienced that on a plane yet.
It's definitely coming to us, don't you think?
Okay. But yes, Starlink is the second business, I would say. So you have space. That's kind of what SpaceX is known for. Starlink is a natural extension of that. And it makes a lot of sense because Starlink leverages the space business to get its satellites up into orbit. So it basically has this in-house transportation system for its satellites. And then you have the most recent addition, which is confusing everyone, which is the AI side. And that is XAI. XAI is confusing because XAI actually also has X within it. So has old Twitter within it. So you can almost even think of like this kind of nested doll where it's like SpaceX, rockets, connectivity, XAI. But within XAI, they have this kind of vertically integrated AI compute plus X plus social media business. So it's like, all of these layers to it. But the third layer is SpaceX AI. That's what it's called now. But XAI, that includes the AI model player, XAI Grok, and then also X, the social media platform. So that's how I viewed it all. That's what's coming to market.
But of course, they also amended their S1 because of this massive deal with Google where they're now spending, $900 and some odd million per month with SpaceX. What do you think about Elon becoming kind of like the Renaissance for data centers?
Yes, that's kind of a new development, and it's been interesting. This is the first publicly available S1 for any sort of AI lab. So it's been really interesting to see the economics of running some of this and really laid out in audited detail. And the big takeaway is that AI is clearly very expensive and everybody is trying to get access to compute.
So there's such a shortage, right? And to be fair, Elon was very prescient to this in building these data centers with Colossus 1 and 2. And he has what everyone else needs, which is, the power, the chips, all the things that are missing for Google, who you think would have been planning for many years to be well equipped for this moment, is turning to SpaceX.
I'm curious how you're seeing it positioned. You have all of these disparate pieces. I think for your average person, they're like, I don't understand why Twitter flows into XAI and then flows into rockets. Why are they all relevant? I'm curious what the Elon story or the kind of big vision is with SpaceX that you're hearing.
I think what he's selling to the street is multiplanetary life and existence, right? And so he views the rocket ship company part of that business as not just putting things into low Earth orbit, but helping us expand humanity. That for the street, I think, is the harder pill to swallow. I think the ones that are much easier to swallow are data centers that are massively profitable for all of these model companies, where it seems like we are constantly in demand for more and more capacity. Seems like a great business. SpaceX, certainly Starlink is a very clear business, right? It's already has a massive footprint today, but if you think about its expansion into SpaceX Mobile and all of these other places, you can really see those visions. But I think it's back to what we talked about. Elon is great at selling these big, audacious dreams, and he's also good at making them true. And so I think it's a compelling vision for the street, even if it's one where they're buying a ticket to the dream.
I think the more realistic vision beyond the, obviously the life on Mars vision that SpaceX will possibly enable, I viewed it as what they're really pitching here is this less so a space company and more a vertically integrated AI infrastructure company that happens to have rockets to enable that, right? I think actually a lot of it is also hinging on this orbital data center play, which I know there are a lot of skeptics about whether we should even put these data centers in space, but I do think that's another part of the storyline that I'm keen to watch out for. I think SemiAnalysis did a really great report analyzing, how feasible it is for us to put data centers in lower orbit. I think that's another major part of the storyline I'll continue to kind of stay close to is truly whether, you can see that rocket story enabling the compute story and how they kind of bidirectionally flow into each other.
Well, we'll be continuing to follow this news story from our beautiful little Lightspeed spaceship here.
I know, and I'm bummed that it's the eve of the IPO. I kind of wish we were filming on IPO day, but...
Of course, but I think the great thing is we're here to make things digestible for people.
And honestly, hopefully next week we'll be able to kind of compare and contrast our predictions from today's episode.
So from the world's largest IPO to the world's largest developer conference, we had Apple's WWDC this week. Claire, you're always at these things. Why were you not invited this week?
I guess Apple just didn't want to have me, but it's okay.
They had enough AI influencers?
I guess, yeah. They had a great set of people there that, I'm close with in the tech world. But Apple is notoriously quite cagey with a lot of their stuff. So I don't know if they wanted a big tech investor in their audience.
This is what comes with Lightspeed. So there were a lot of announcements on stage at WWDC, but I think where people have naturally gravitated towards is Siri, right? It feels like for many years, people have been making jokes about Siri and its capabilities. And this year, they decided to partner with Google's Gemini family of models to create the Apple Foundation model in partnership with Gemini. And some of the tech reactions seem pretty strong. It seems like Siri is now functional.
I feel like when they showcase Siri AI, people were like, finally, because they've been teasing this since 2024. I know, I remember writing about this on my Substack 2 years ago. And honestly, I kind of hyped it up. I was like, guys, AI Siri's coming, and then they didn't deliver. And now I'm like, okay, I feel like Apple has time and time again, unfortunately, failed me on realizing this vision of personalized intelligence. And I hear you, like, I think they actually have the most surface area and advantage in building true personalized intelligence. It's just hard because of the privacy story. What they're doing this time, though, with Siri AI, in terms of making sure that AI runs privately on your device, is they have this deal with Gemini, and it's an Apple version of Gemini. That's actually going to be reported by Bloomberg roughly $1 billion a year. And then they will also have their own foundation models that run on-device tasks. So, for example, if you're doing, a heavy reasoning task, something that might involve multimodal, you might rely on Gemini's family of models. But if it's a fairly routine task like summarizing a text thread, that'll probably run on device. That's kind of their answer to the privacy problem. Another thing they're launching is something called a private cloud compute framework, where the Gemini models will only run on Apple's infrastructure. So no user data will be shared with Google. So that's the other privacy piece that they're rolling out. I think that's, to your point, Apple is known for privacy. And I think now partnering with a frontier model provider like Google, but still maintaining that privacy story has been really important. And I think you're seeing that with this WWDC release.
Yeah. And to do this, they did break up with OpenAI, right? Where the last Siri, the promise was there and it didn't quite work. It basically felt like you were sort of using a version of ChatGPT. Why do you think that they broke up with OpenAI and decided to choose Google? I mean, and Google's been a long time both partner and rival to Apple. What was behind that decision?
I honestly don't know the behind the scenes conversations. We do know that they were evaluating both OpenAI and Anthropic before ultimately choosing Google for this. I think Google and Apple already have an existing relationship,
Absolutely.
right? Google pays Apple around, it looks like $20 billion a year to be their default search engine. So that's a very deeply intertwined relationship where Apple is a main, default distributor search engine-wise for Google. And then now you have, in turn, Apple paying Google $1 billion a year to run, custom Apple-tuned versions of Gemini. And so they already have an existing relationship there. I think that is what I would imagine one factor. Another thing I see playing out is you have Google already kind of owning many layers of the stack. And so they have Google devices, Google wearables. I think you have a player here that is familiar with the integration across the full stack versus I think of OpenAI and Anthropic really playing more at the pure model layer. When I look at the three big frontier model providers, Google is one that I view as having a little bit more of a foundation around commercializing the technology. And I think that's where Apple has struggled, is the integration part. It's not that they don't have the technology, it's the integrating into all the existing Apple pipes versus I think OpenAI, Anthropic, net new businesses, they're model providers. They're relying on developers who know how to take this raw capability and integrate it. I think Google is kind of in the middle where they also have an existing stack that they need to integrate this powerful technology with. So for me, I felt like that was probably where I saw the most alignment.
Yeah, I also think we got to this point where models are now all fairly smart. And I feel like for them, they don't need the best model. They just need the model that can do the job for what Apple needs. And I think Google has a lot of the infrastructure that made sense. So it's interesting. And it's interesting to see the reactions are so positive to Siri AI after so many years of negativity.
I think the stock did drop though.
Really?
Slightly, yes. Yeah, not majorly. But I think it wasn't because people didn't believe in Siri AI. It's more like the dynamic was that Apple has kind of been boy who cried wolf for a while, and they've constantly been pitching this. And so I think people were waiting for bigger drops, but it feels like every single year they're teasing finally personalized intelligence, finally Siri AI. But I do think this is the year we might see that happen. I mean, this is the year that they've kind of finally admitted that we're not going to be a frontier model provider. Our advantage compounds and sits in the consumer distribution layer. We're going to stick with that. And I think that has been a good reckoning, because I think for a while they were, are we going to compete with Google? Are we going to compete with OpenAI in the model layer? Now they're like, we're not even going to touch that. So hopefully they can focus purely on integration and distribution. And yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be interesting. I also think the other thing at play here is you have John Turnus taking over from Tim Cook.
Yes.
Kind of sad that it was Tim's last one.
Last WWDC. Did you see that video that he posted online of all those celebrities? They all do the good morning interpretation of Tim. It's really cute.
Tim Cook has had such a great run, and I know a lot of people have, criticized him for the AI story, and that's been, nice. I still think that's an evolving story, but I truly think he's been such a great leader for Apple, and I'm obviously sad to see Tim Apple go, as Trump calls him, and excited to see what John Turnus does. And then for our final story, I wanted to address that Cloudflare report on humans being overtaken by agents on the internet.
I know. This was, I think, a lot faster than most people expected, right?
I think the CEO of Cloudflare himself predicted end of 2027. So we're really early.
We're really early. And I think that is both shocking, but also this is the pace at which AI is accelerating, right? There are now more agents on the web than there are people.
Yes. So you have this report from Cloudflare called the Cloudflare Radar, which basically shows you where traffic is going on the internet. Cloudflare, for context, is a toll booth for a certain segment of the internet. They sit in front of about 1 in 5 website providers. Other people kind of call them air traffic control. So they have visibility into what's funneling, what kind of requests are hitting certain websites. And so for the open crawlable web, this includes blogs, websites.
But this isn't everything, right?
Yes.
This is not closed apps.
Yes.
There's lots of places that Cloudflare doesn't touch, but there's also a lot that it does.
Yes. And for the segments that they do touch, which, blogs, websites, what they're seeing is that automated traffic is hitting 57.4% of web requests from agents versus 42.6% from people. As a firm, we've been thinking a lot about what the agentic web looks like. We've made bets on companies like Exa and Profound that are playing in the space that we can go into. Hopefully we bring them on as guests to talk more about how this paradigm, what we're seeing around this paradigm shift with the agentic web. But what I'm really thinking a lot about is, one, what new layer of companies get unlocked from here, right? I think now that we have agents traversing the internet more than humans, you're going to have a whole stack of companies, whether that's agent identity management, agent native analytics, GEO versus SEO, figuring out content licensing. You have Exa and Parallel playing in the space. And then obviously also how these agents transact on our behalf. There are all these protocols coming out from Shopify, from Google even, on creating this new foundation for how agents buy on our behalf. But the reason I think we're really seeing this is because as we run through more and more agentic workflows, what agents are allowed to do is they can hit 500 websites at a time to find one answer. Versus for a human, you're really looking through 10 blue links. And so that's kind of why I think we're seeing the number difference. It's not that we have more agents on the internet, yes, in raw number perhaps, but the reason you're seeing this dynamic shift is not necessarily because agents are overtaking humans. It's more so because the agentic workflow requires an agent to traverse all available websites. They're going to hit all of them, find the right information, and pull the right one. So the information comes to you. Versus I think in original internet is, if I'm trying to find information, I'll click through 10 blue links. And so you can see why agents are starting to outnumber humans. It's not that there are more AIs and agents on the internet. It's more that as a human, I'm just naturally
visit more places as an agent more quickly.
Exactly. So that's kind of, I think, what's driving the number change.
For sure. But I do think the worry for someone like me who's been a classical cost per click advertiser for so many years and for so many brands, right, is now when you've got a view on the web, is that a view from an agent or is it a view from a person? And if it's a view for an agent, how is it being evaluated, right? And
Yeah.
like, what does that mean for the future of advertising? I also think, I know you mentioned it, but for SEO, SEM companies like Profound, like it's that much more important now to understand what are the agents talking about your brand or your company or your product than it is, perhaps the ads you have running in various platforms.
Yeah.
But maybe it also like means you should focus on other places. Like, is out of home even more important than it used to be? Is some of these advertising on closed apps like more important because that there'll be real eyeballs watching?
How do you think about monetization now? Like, do you think that running an ad on Google is less valuable now?
Well, I think Google, thanks to their ecosystem, they've got this massive opportunity with Gemini, and I think they will likely be okay in the way that this is going to shake out. I do think it's still important to run ads. A lot of people still use Google, and I think they'll continue to use Google. But I think as trust of AI agents continues to rise, it's certainly a red flag for them, and that's the biggest cornerstone of their business now.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of whispers about how AI overviews might cannibalize a lot of their traditional search revenue, right? But I also think, what we've also seen is that when you are being funneled through an AI conversation and a link that is suggested to you by AI, those are often more high intent. So I think actually Shopify has some data from just this quarter where they showed that AI referred visitors converted at nearly 50% higher rates than organic search and 14% higher average order values. And AI referred orders up roughly 13x year over year. So I think what you're seeing here is you're not necessarily getting more shoppers per se. People are not spending as much time on your website because they have an agent scanning that product instead. But you have shoppers who are much more high intent and more likely to convert. So I think there's that dynamic at play is, yes, it's frustrating because our entire internet is built on this premise that, we're monetizing on eyeballs. All we care about is how many people see things. I think where I have questions is, are we going to move to a world where monetization changes even to like outcomes based? Like, I'm not going to pay per click. I'm not going to pay per view because that doesn't work. Yeah.
Feels like that's very much on the horizon, right? I mean, history does repeat itself. Like, we saw this with the rise of social advertising. Like, the ads got more contextual. They understood more about you. Yes, they were chasing you around the web a little bit, but they knew a lot about what you wanted. But I think this new layer of, agent assisted purchasing has enabled people to go so much further down their decision tree that when they do click that link, that they have a much higher intent than maybe they did from being chased around the internet by, advertising bots.
As someone creating these ads, what I wonder is if you will now pay not necessarily per click, but per completed action. Like, I think if we're seeing the same shift towards usage-based or task-based, so as opposed to just paying a raw number, I'm going to pay $1,000 for XYZ amount of ads. Instead, I pay $1,000 for XYZ amount of completed purchases, right? Or commission-based even. Like, I think there's just a lot that I have questions around how monetization in the agentic web will work.
Well, it does feel like we've moved to usage-based pricing in so many other areas. Why not this one?
I've also been thinking a lot about where value accrues in the stack. As someone who creates a lot of content, is in the media world.
What does this mean for influencers? Like,
yes.
Does this make you more high value?
My early thesis is that, yes, I think having a human behind and telling, you and guiding you through that curation aspect is important. I think that's why influencer marketing has worked really well. TBD, because I know there's, questions around AI avatar influencers and how that will change the dynamic. And, as more and more slop fills the feed and, what we were discussing around dead internet theory, does that mean that people are like tired of influencers? I think there's that dynamic and potential risk too. But I think for me, at least for now, if I'm spending less time on those 10 blue links shopping and clicking through multiple tabs and looking at a bunch of different products and just telling an AI to find me 5 options, then maybe my intent is rerouted to spending time scrolling and listening to influencers telling me, actually, this dress is better than the other. And so I do see value accruing more to the kind of human layer that is giving that recommendation. I see that being the new recommendation layer versus Google giving you these, personalized suggestions based off of cookies that aren't necessarily accurate.
For sure. Claire, do you know what the Cloudflare office and the Lightwork set have in common?
No.
A lava lamp.
Really?
Yeah, they're all over. They actually, a big piece of Cloudflare security.
Yeah.
They have a whole wall of lava lamps, and then they've got cameras monitoring the lava lamps, and they use that to create the security that makes Cloudflare one of the safest products out there.
That is so cool. And maybe we'll have a lava lamp set versus lava lamp set discussion with the Cloudflare team.
Let's get Matthew Princeton here to share his love of lava lamps.
I am so excited about this one. Our guest today is Ravi Mhatre, who is a partner and co-founder of Lightspeed, where he has spent more than 25 years helping to build one of the most iconic venture firms in the world. Over his career, Ravi has backed some of the most defining tech companies of the last 2 decades, including but not limited to Anthropic, AppDynamics, MuleSoft, Zscaler, Rubrik, Anduril, the list goes on. He's a multiple-time Forbes Midas List honoree, and as the co-founder of this firm, he's truly had a front-row seat and a hand in shaping how tech has evolved from cloud to this AI-native era. Ravi, welcome to Lightwork. Thank you so much for being on here. You have truly been so instrumental to the Lightspeed journey, the trajectory of the entire tech and startup ecosystem. And so we feel very lucky today to have you on as our guest. I imagine a lot of founders and people tuning in will be curious to hear about your perspective on all things AI, startups, innovation. So my first question to you today is, what does success look like in a founder?
Well, the founders we really try to focus in on, particularly in today with the rapid pace of evolution in AI. We talk about founders who really are thinking in future tense. I sort of borrowed that phrase. Dario, the co-founder and CEO of Anthropic, I kind of learned from watching him. He uses intellectually his understanding of exponentials and the fact that intelligence is progressing in its power at an exponential rate, to always be thinking about this phenomenon where the accelerating speed at which you have to envision that there's more capability in the platform, and you need to design an application or whatever your capability is in a way that you are planning for that. Imagine the app that you want to build with where the intelligence is going to be in 6 months, because intelligence will catch up that fast. And I feel like I've seen that in founders who really have this sense for this viscerally for the rapid pace at which the rate of intelligence is progressing. And they imagine everything about what they want to build as a design point for not what's happening today, but what's happening in the future. And frankly, because it's continuing to accelerate, we need founders who are really have the vision as much as they have an understanding of what they're going to enter the market with today, the vision of where their value point in the market is going to be 6 months out, a year out, and kind of continuously evolving in the future. That's really different than in prior generations of technology, with the internet, with cloud, with mobility, where it really was that a new architecture emerged, like the commercialization of HTTP as a protocol. That was the internet. Or the fact that with the cloud, all of a sudden, you essentially could rent a server on demand, and that server, it didn't physically have to exist in your data closet. It could be 100 miles or 1,000 miles away in some cloud that you didn't see. But it was one change. And then founders, we really wanted to understand their vision. With this new platform, what would you build on it? In the age of AI, though, because the platform, the intelligence, the model itself is progressing so rapidly, that idea of how you envision what you're going to build with a startup, it no longer works. And so there's really a lot of emphasis, focus, rigor. We spend time with founders to understand their thinking in this sort of new dimension, which is almost like the first derivative of how you would think about what your product or your value proposition is with prior platform shifts and technology changes.
As you think about these exponential curves, there are always naturally some winners. I'm curious how you think about the founders that will reach critical scale in this moment. And are there things that you look out for that might not necessarily show up on a pitch deck?
The thing that is really remarkable about AI is it is happening at a scale that is, I think, unprecedented, certainly unprecedented in what I've seen with other technology innovations. And what I mean by that, it is simultaneously affecting almost all parts of economic activity, many, many parts of society, of public institutions, and of, all of us as individuals and consumers and how we live. And that amount of change happening in parallel is, it is incredible. And it means there are enormous opportunities happening, in many places at once. I think that part of the phenomenon is with AI is very different. And the other thing I'd say that it is, again, different, and it completely informs how we think about who we are backing and the ideas that we want to back is this fact of the exponential, which is, all technology has moved on exponential curves, but the ones with AI, there are many exponentials where they are bending or they are at their inflection simultaneously, and they're just happening much faster. I like to use the examples of Waymos for anybody who's in San Francisco. Up until 2 years ago, you'd see a few, but people were, in the driver's seat, waiting for something to go wrong, and they were still collecting data. And at some point, the intelligence crossed over the exponential. We call them tipping points of being powerful enough that an AI model could drive a car and do it in a way where it was 3 or 4 times more reliable than any human driver. And at that point, they started to scale up, and these Waymos are now basically being operated in, I think it's probably at least 10 cities. I know they're launching 2 to 3 cities, I think, a week. And if you walk around San Francisco, 1 in every 3 cars, it seems like, has no driver. And it's just quite remarkable to me that once the intelligence for driving a vehicle crossed that threshold or tipping point because of the exponential, you just saw this, all of a sudden, massive, rapid, kind of proliferation of the technology. We've seen it more directly at Lightspeed with our involvement at Anthropic with Claude Code. 2 years ago, people really talked about the fact that artificial intelligence for coding could be used to do essentially autocomplete like a text editor. But the idea that you could have an AI model think about, reason about, and write 100,000 lines of code and have any chance of it being, correctly written, properly formed, and doing the functional task. I mean, that was thought to be truly impossible. And you were sort of viewed as being not just contrarian, but outright wrong if you thought, that was likely to occur in the near term. And then really with Anthropic's release of Opus 4.5, models, again, the intelligence to reason about enough of a code base, hundreds of thousands or millions of lines simultaneously in a way that the model could derive the insights to write code in some holistic way. The model's intelligence crossed over that tipping point, that threshold, and it went from being not possible to possible. And the incredible thing then was when Anthropic launched Claude Code, which was really the first agentic or AI coding tool that was designed intentionally to be agentic and to write much sort of longer and more complicated forms of software. I look at these things and I think the thing to take away about artificial intelligence is, one, it is a paradigm shift that is very, very horizontal, touching many parts of our economy and society and all of us individually. And the other is the speed of these exponentials. When you get into the curve, the knee of the curve, the inflection, you cross over these tipping points such that in, a matter of a year or 6 months, you can see things going from seeming impossible to knowing that because of AI, they are now inevitable.
Ravi, you had this very prescient observation that enterprise trust is the moat. How has that observation shaped the kinds of advice that you give founders today?
So something at Lightspeed we always understood was that in an enterprise, unlike in many consumer form factor use cases, the organization that was going to bring the new technology in would be rigorous in their evaluation of whether that technology, could scale to, the kind of rigorous demands of whoever the users were in a different way than an individual consumer. They would be very focused on security and access control. If you bring in a new database, it's not something where you can have every employee in the organization access that data. There are certain, disciplines around access and security that you would need to get to make this new platform, whatever it was, a database, a server, what we called enterprise grade. And so that, I think, was always something very familiar to Lightspeed and certainly to me. And I think one of the things we understood early about these transformer-based models or large language models was that, notwithstanding the fact that early on, and the growth initially happened with things like ChatGPT that were, a consumer product, that as soon as these technologies started to address critical use cases for enterprises, and by the way, AI models, it is a very different reference architecture than client server. There would have to be a way to make them what we understood as enterprise grade. And that, when we really broke it down technologically, that had to do with, okay, you're bringing a lot of data together to train the models like an index. You need some form of access control around that. So the data that is in these intelligent models isn't sort of all of it accessible to all people in an enterprise use case. There are a lot of things around these models. Again, they are probabilistic systems. And so at some level, you want them to take in data that is highly variable and be creative and come out with answers that are not going to be the same every time. However, with a system like that, you need something which is a technology for what they call explainability. If an AI model made a decision and it's something different than it did before, that may be okay, but you need a technological way to understand precisely that it did that and why it did that. And so I think in today's environment where now we, have crossed over and we're seeing intelligence really start to grow and scale in the enterprise, and a lot speculate that market, unlike with prior waves of technology, the market in enterprise for intelligence may actually be significantly larger than the market we're seeing initially for consumer. And that market is going to require that the intelligences, particularly at the frontier, that they be enterprise grade immediately. If they're not, they'll get in for the prototype. If they are sort of enterprise grade and have the trust infrastructure built into them from the beginning so they can be deployed, then they will be production.
Sure. Yeah. It used to be you build and then you build trust, but I think your whole point of building trust from day one makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think just the paradigm shift that we're witnessing and the way that Lightspeed is also constantly updating its first principles and updating the way that it works with founders in this moment is truly something so special. As we look forward, you've obviously spent so much time with thousands of founders. I'm curious what still excites you when you're meeting a founder for the first time, and how do you know when you're witnessing something special?
30 years into, my career as a technology investor, and I have to say, meeting founders is, I think it's the thing that keeps me coming back. When I meet, smart, and it's generations of people who are now, younger than me, but smart people who really have insight into new ideas and are enthusiastic about, again, what those ideas can do technologically in the world that could benefit all of us. It's super energizing for me. And I'd say, the founders that I think there are more than one archetype of founder that can be successful for me. And I think for Lightspeed, we really resonate with founders who they are, I'd say, very first principles thinkers about technology at its ground truth level. I'm always amazed. They can tell you a story that when we look back, that story 5 years and even 10 years later, it really came to pass. I find that there are, the founders I've worked with over long periods of time, they just have this uncanny ability it's think in future tense, to kind of have the dynamic range to really think at a ground truth level about technology, but then up level all the way to, have the kind of long game insights about, what they will build and how that will impact, their chosen market or their part of society where they want to insert the thing that they've built.
Ravi, this is our first time of Lightspeed dipping our toes into new media. What do you think about Lightspeed having a weekly show?
The most exciting part of this to me is, I think, Claire, obviously, you and Josh together, you understand how this media can tell the stories that help people understand technology and really demystify some of the remarkable innovations that are happening and bridge from a technical innovation to kind of how it will affect us in the real world. And we see those stories every day. We almost are desensitized to it. But I think helping people understand what we do at Lightspeed, the fact that we are thinking very deeply in first principles about technology, and we are investing in people who we believe are going to build the technology that shapes our future and does it in a way that hopefully benefits all of us. And so taking that story and make it more accessible to people, I think that's remarkable. And it's energizing to me because I want people to understand what we work on with a lot of sincerity and a lot of intensity every day.
I think Lightspeed can be this place where people first get excited about technologies. They realize that this is an exciting moment, and hopefully we get to help narrate and tell those stories in an accessible way and bring people into the Lightspeed universe. Because I do think there's so much intellectual rigor, depth, and substance that we bring to our work. And, I noticed this even in my first day at Lightspeed. I was like, I wish some of these conversations and insights
These are
were
the smartest people we know. And now with the show, hopefully we get to show people a little bit of an inside look into a walled garden that they don't often get to see.
Yes, and I think really recognizing that it's important for Lightspeed to share all the things we're thinking about, even to pre-founders or people who are still operating before they even fit into this founder archetype, and really just be this place where you get excited about technology in the way that, I always think of my end viewer as me, a freshman at Stanford who was excited about tech but didn't know how to involve myself. And now hopefully this can be a space for people like that.
Well, I'll be happy when we get you up there on the rankings with Wait in Space and Lex Friedman. Then we'll know we've arrived.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, big
I hope.
shoes. We'll get there. Ravi, thank you so much for joining us for our very first episode of Lightwork. We are going to ask you to come back probably more than you want to, but thank you very much. This has been such a joy for us working to build the set and this product, and thank you to Claire.
And truly, thank you so much for creating Lightspeed as a space where we can continue to co-build the future with this team, with you all, and with the founders we feel very lucky to partner with.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Beacon just closed a $225 million Series C, and they're an AI native holding company where they acquire these small, profitable software businesses in industries you might have never heard of. Their targets are these sort of unglamorous workflow tools that run schools, sports leagues, campgrounds, construction firms, and even government services. So far, they've made more than 30 acquisitions in 2 years, and they say their portfolio EBITDA is up over 50% year over year. Interestingly, their founder and CEO calls Beacon the anti-private equity firm. They'll do all the regular stuff like own the essential software layer, let AI do the modernization, but instead they want to hold the companies indefinitely and never sell. They'll reinvest, and they keep the founders on board throughout earnouts.
Sandstone raised $30 million in a Series A led by Lightspeed. They're building the operating system for in-house legal teams, connecting contract matters, counterparties, obligations into one working surface. This round came 6 months after the $10 million seed round led by Sequoia, and the company says revenue is up more than 40x in 90 days. Current customers include Wayfair, Grindr, Mercury, Cox Media, and 11 Labs. We believe in-house legal is one of the largest underserved markets in enterprise software, and Sandstone is how we think it can get fixed.
Finally, A Security came out of stealth with $37 million in a seed and Series A combined to take on weaponized AI. They're building this agent-based security platform where they have autonomous attackers and defender agents that continuously find and close these real attack paths before they can be exploited. For example, in an early test, they were able to find 1.2 million sensitive records, including social security numbers, that had just been sitting exposed for 7 years, totally undetected.
So Claire, this was a big week. We had a lot of stories. And for me, what I just kept coming back to is it made me feel like the early days of AI and investing when it was all about the model layer and back down to the infrastructure. And here we are again talking about these stories where time and time again, it's coming back to the infrastructure.
Yeah, and it's just so fun to also have Ravi on to kind of pull us out into that 30,000-foot view and just remind us how big of a moment this is. And
The places we should be paying attention to.
yeah, and it just kind of reminded me again how energizing it is to be able to share these stories and talk about them and actually have people also interested in the future. I'm excited to continue doing that. Many more episodes to come.
Yeah, it's so much fun to build this with you, to like see your lens and apply it to building Lightwork together. It's really, really a fun experience. And I'm excited for our audience to come along with us. And
Yeah.
certainly, if you guys see an episode and there's a story or something where you want us to go deeper, we have so many interesting experts that we'd love to have come help explain and just make a little bit more sense of AI for all of you.
There's going to be a lot more. Make sure to tune in next week.
For more Lightwork.